Well, hello everyone. This is Shannon Vance-Ocampo. I use she and her pronouns, and I serve as the general presbyter for the Presbytery of Southern New England. And this is Connecting Our Conversations, our podcast space for conversations that push the edges of our faith and help us to deepen discipleship. We've taken a bit of a hiatus from the podcast these last few months, but we are coming back with a spring season. Our first two episodes will be focused on nonviolence, and the last 2 weeks of Lent for our presbytery study, Nonviolence for Lent. And this is the first of two of those focused episodes. The Presbytery of Southern New England is a regional governing body in the Presbyterian Church USA. So today we're going to be talking to a ministry friend and colleague of mine next door in the Presbytery of Boston, the Reverend Trina Portillo, who is the pastor of the Presbyterian Church in Burlington, which is in Massachusetts, just over the border from our presbytery. And Trina has served this congregation and community for the last 10 years, since 2016. And like me, she's a graduate of McCormick Theological Seminary and the College of Worcester. So that's always fun to have somebody, both places. We both went to the same school, so that's always fun, Trina. And Trina has served in Boston as their moderator of the Presbytery and also been active in immigrant and food justice ministries, also in Boston Presbytery. So we're so glad to have her here with us today to talk about our theme of nonviolence and how she's living it out in her local ministry context. So welcome, Trina.
Hey, good to be here with you.
Yeah,
Thanks for inviting me.
absolutely. So we'll start with introductions. I've said a few things about you, but tell us more. Tell us about who you are and what you're up to in ministry and anything you'd like to share.
Um, so you said a lot already in the intro, but yes, my name is Trina and I use she, her pronouns. Um, I have been living in Massachusetts since 2014, and my husband is an immigrant. He's from El Salvador, and we have one daughter um, who is in high school now. And so uh, what else do I say about me? My ministry here. Um, I
Yeah,
don't know.
what's the church like? Tell us about the congregation.
The congregation here is when I started here was a very multicultural, diverse congregation.
Mhm.
We have people who have been in this area forever, and we have people who are very recent arrivals to the US and to Massachusetts. Um, Many of our members are from West Africa, Cameroon, and Ghana specifically. And then there are smatterings of people from different parts of the world that have found their church home here. And since 2020, like post-pandemic life, the church has gotten quite a bit smaller. And I would say it's kind of less diverse than it used to be as
Mm.
well. And so we have recently, in the last 2 years, about 2 years ago, a Cameroonian church asked if they could start a ministry here.
Mm.
And so our church has hosted a congregation of the Presbyterian Church of Cameroon,
Oh,
which
wow.
was then like formally organized as a PCC congregation last year.
Wow.
And so that's been interesting to see the development of an immigrant-centered community. Um, and it has also impacted the diversity that we had seen in some of our own PCUSA congregations in the Presbytery of Boston, as people have kind of been drawn to a church that they feel like is closer to home for them, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So that's been an interesting
Yeah.
journey.
It's really interesting. And, for those who are listening from Southern New England, it's a bit of a segue from what we're going to talk about today. But there are denominations that are our sister denominations, Presbyterian denominations in other parts of the world who are now founding churches in the United
Hmm.
States of where they have large groups of folks that have come here as immigrants, right? And so we
Yeah.
do see that in some parts of the larger PCUSA where we have churches like this one you're describing from the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon. So it's a church that's in a PCUSA church building, right? But it's the congregation is a member of a denomination in another country. So it's a really
Right.
interesting kind of thing that's happening around the PCUSA in some parts. And I think we don't always sort of notice it until it happens here, right? But
Yeah.
um, so I just
Yeah, they
mentioned,
call it the diaspora,
yeah, the
the
diaspora.
diaspora congregations in the
Yeah,
United States. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it brings up all sorts of interesting issues and ideas for us. And at as we know, the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon is really large. They're
Hmm.
growing so much, and I'm not sure if it's either the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon or the Presbyterian Church in Ghana. I hate to misspeak, but one of them, I believe, has a larger membership than the PCUSA does. Uh,
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, one of them does. I can't remember which
Maybe
one.
both of them.
They probably, yeah, it could be both of them. But I remember hearing about that a couple of years ago. So yeah, so it's really interesting to see how our sort of global world is interacting. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's really great, Trina. Thank you for creating a space for them and a place for them to land here and that hospitality. So as we were talking before we got on the podcast, we're doing this Lenten series for our presbytery around the theme of nonviolence, and we wanted to do that this year because, of course, issues in the public square are so big for us these days in the United States. And how do we show up authentically as people of faith, as Christians, responsibly? And what does that look like? And so we're taking a look over these 6 weeks at the six kind of core principles or pillars. They're called different things in different parts of the
Hmm.
literature of Kingian nonviolence, which is the type of nonviolence that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King taught here in the United States, which comes out of Gandhian nonviolent practice.
Right.
And these six pillars, and it works out nicely because there's 6 Sundays in Lent. And so we're headed into the fifth Sunday of Lent. And so we're going to be talking about that fifth pillar in a little bit. But I wonder if you could share a little bit about in your ministry or in your formation, what has nonviolence meant for you, both personally and as a leader, as a pastor? And how's that showing up in your world today?
Um, so I think since my time in college, actually, I think that Dr. Chuck Kammer was one of my
Yeah.
influences in first teaching me about or teaching, exposing me to nonviolence and liberation theology in particular. He was a religious studies professor at the College of Worcester,
Mhm.
um, and very formative. I think his classes and his teaching, in my life were a big influence. So that was where I started learning more about the development of liberation theologies in different parts of the world, from Latin America, Gustavo Gutierrez, and then it spread from there all around the world to different communities. There's Mujerista theology, there's Asian, um, you know, I don't know, African. There's every different culture and group has approached it through its own lens, like through its own unique experiences.
Right.
Um, and so I think learning about that and how it um, has influenced uh, people's interpretation of what Christianity is and
Mhm.
how we are called to live as Christians in the world, and how that uh, is influenced by our particular experiences and um, lenses, I guess, how different people have experienced the world. So that was a really big influence for me. I took a course, I don't remember right now if it was in college or seminary, but it was a course on Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and
Hmm.
studying their writings together, like side by side.
That was at
Um,
Worcester. Yep. I took that class at Worcester
did you
too.
take that? Was that
Malcolm and
Worcester?
Milton. Yeah. Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, good. So that's still one that I really
Yeah.
remember. And the book, the collection of Dr. King's writings from that we used, it's a huge volume called Strength to Love. And it's
Yeah.
still one that I like refer to regularly and go to. And I think that, um, we meaning white Christians tend to reference Dr. King a lot
Hmm.
and say, point to his teachings about, love only, hate cannot drown out hate, only love can do that. Um, Peace is not merely the absence of tension, but the presence of. There are a lot of quotes that we can go to and pull out in our minds that are sort of the I don't want to say the peaceful version of Dr. King,
The
but
Dr. King we've sanitized over the
the
years. Right?
sanitized
Yeah.
version. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's really important to note that really Dr. King's critiques of the society in which he lived are
Hmm.
still very relevant to the society that we are seeing today, that we are, up against the same systemic injustices and this interwoven um, threads of militarism, economic injustice, and racism that
Hmm.
he was pointing to are still what we are,
Hmm.
you know, dealing with today. So I think when we sanitize Dr. King to like take out all of this kind of the really very pointed and very sharp um, critiques and analysis that he was offering and that he was writing about, uh, it really strips away a lot of what his the power of his message and teachings really still have
Yeah.
to share with us today.
Yeah. Yeah. I know people don't like to sort of they want to sort of, his speech on the mall in Washington or some of these pieces, but I'm always pointing people to his speech at Riverside exactly 1 year before he was assassinated, right, where he spoke out
Hmm.
against the Vietnam War and had such a sharp critique of militarism and violence.
Yeah.
And those are, you know, um, pieces that folks don't necessarily always want to interact with, or his just critique in general, which was so on point and I think is still so prescient today, right? About how whiteness shows up and into avoidance. And,
The letter from the Birmingham jail was
yeah, yeah, and
very
even,
directed toward white moderates or white
yeah.
conservatives. Yeah.
Yeah, and even his last full book was completely on that topic, right? And so
Hmm.
it's I think those pieces we've maybe not listened to as much, but and even taking apart, my goal with this Lent series has been really picking apart the particular six pieces that make up nonviolent practice and how challenging they may or may not be for us.
Hmm.
Really trying to just look at them in a little bit of a deeper dive than usual. So that's been one of my hopes that we go back and reacquaint ourselves with those pieces or acquaint ourselves with them for the first time because
Yep.
they hold immense power still today. So I know one of the things that you've been doing sort of in local nonviolent practice is there's this weekly vigil that's going on outside of an immigration and customs enforcement facility in
Hmm.
Burlington, the town where your church is. And so just tell me the story of that. I know it's been going on for a while and has
Yeah.
interfaith components to it, but tell me about this witness and what's happening
So
there.
it does. It's called Bearing Witness at ICE, and there is an ICE facility, as you noted. It is. It's not a detention facility. It's an enforcement and removal office.
Hmm.
So it's an innocuous looking office building in an office park next to this huge mall here, the Burlington Mall.
Mhm.
Um, and there are other, businesses and offices and restaurants and things all along that same street. And you would never know what it was you, unless you were going there for that reason. There's no like big sign out front or something that says immigration, whatever. Um, so it has been leased to the government since 2008. It is privately held by a local landowner.
Mhm.
Um, and uh, so, yeah, since 2008, the federal government has been using that as their regional headquarters for ICE, um, Department of Homeland Security and ICE operations. Since the new Trump administration came back into office in 2025, there have been noticeable upticks in the number of people who've been um, held there, like they come for a regular check-in appointment, or somewhere in their immigration process, they're maybe in the asylum process, or they have some sort of temporary status and they have to come for regular appointments. Those used to be routine. A lot of people used to be able to do them online, actually.
Mhm.
And now they have become both more frequent and required to come in person. And sometimes people are detained at those appointments. Other reasons that people are sent there is they were picked up somewhere else in this area. It could be anywhere in New England, actually.
Mhm.
People have been picked up in Rhode Island and Connecticut and Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and they're brought there initially for processing before they are sent to other detention facilities
Mhm.
around the country. Actually, we don't know where people are being sent. So there is only one detention facility in Massachusetts. That's the Plymouth County Correction Center. Um, and other than that, people are sent all over the place. So last year, actually, today was the 48th week that we have met as bearing witness.
Mhm.
It was started by a couple, Jared and Lori Beresin, who initially were coming, just the two of them,
Mhm.
and standing out in front of the ICE facility and saying, we are standing here to literally bear witness to what is happening to our immigrant neighbors, community, and people throughout Massachusetts. So I'm not even sure how long it was, just the two of them who were coming there. And then over the course of the last year, more of us started to hear about it. I mean, more people started to hear about it. Some of the local clergy, myself, Reverend Andrew Harris, Rabbi Susan Abramson, um, our Unitarian colleagues from the town of Bedford, um, Reverend Jamie Hinson Rieger and John Gibbons, we all started coming regularly,
Mhm.
and showing up every week. And so at some point, Jared and Lori said, this is getting to be a lot. Like, we're going to be saying there were more people coming and just sort of more things to manage, right? Like logistically, we had a bunch of signs, who was going to take the signs every week, all those kinds of things. So it just sort of started growing. And they were looking for help as organizers. So then we formed this organizing committee, and it's Jared and Lori and some of the local clergy. I do want to make a side note here that during the first Trump administration, we also had a witness or a regular vigil at that same facility.
Mhm.
We called it Jericho walks at that time. And we used to walk literally around the building, which they don't allow us to do anymore.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
no,
Yeah.
not allowed to do that. But we did have a presence up there
Mm.
during the first Trump administration as well. And then under Biden, we weren't as regular, we weren't there all the time. Um, so from bearing witness, which is every Wednesday from 11 to 1, since I guess since last summer, other groups have started to organize similar witnesses or vigils on the other days of the week.
Oh, okay.
So we now have a presence there Monday through Friday, and there are two groups that also meet on Saturdays. So recently, a volunteer has started, she's organizing like a food distribution, and they have some resources for people who are coming out of the building. People have come for their appointments, and she has some bags of groceries there. If people just want to take some extra food with them. Um, Someone has been donating teddy bears for some of the kids that come out. I had a really powerful interaction last week um, with a family from Brazil, and it was the parents, two daughters, and I think um, another woman who was with them. I don't know if she was a family member or was there to interpret, or was there for support in some way. And they came out, and everyone was in tears.
Oh,
And I asked them if they were okay, and they said yes. And I asked if someone had been kept, detained, and they said no, but they have to come back.
right.
So that's the thing. It's like uh you're going through all these steps, and immigrants are going through all these steps to try to follow the rules and do the right thing and follow the process as has been laid out for them. But the government keeps changing those rules and moving the benchmarks and taking away things that used to be
Right.
legal statuses like TPS or asylum seeking and all these things. It's like you can't
Mhm.
win.
Right.
You can't win in this
Mhm.
game. And it's not a game, it's people's lives.
Right.
So, um,
Yeah.
I was able to talk with them, and I was there in that capacity. I was there as a chaplain that day,
Mm.
actually. So the Mass Council of Churches has taken on the role of organizing chaplain presence, and we're
Mm.
trying to have um, at least two chaplains present there from about 7:30 or 8 in the morning when people start to show up for their check-in appointments until around 11 in the morning. That's kind of when things peter out, like um and I think that's been really powerful too. So that's a separate initiative from what's happening with bearing witness.
Mm.
Um yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me about these witnesses. They're nonviolent witnesses. Um, what's been the discussion in the faith communities about that and about how they're showing up?
Um I'm not sure what the discussion in the faith communities have been. There's a lot of faith communities who are participating,
Yeah, I can tell.
and that's been great. I mean, we had a day last month that was um I don't want to get the name wrong. I think there was like a whole day that was organized ICE.
Hmm.
And so there were different Jewish organizations that were represented as the speakers. We've had various politicians come and speak, um, community organizers come and speak. So the way that the format, I should say, is we have um, we have some music leaders who,
Mm.
as people are gathering, they'll be playing some music, and sometimes people are, sing along. Then at about 11:15, the organizing committee gets up, and we have a weekly script that we follow to let people know about safety and where we can stand and what the police have asked us to do and not do, and how to not engage with some of the pro-ICE supporters who have been showing up
Oh,
in recent weeks and they stand on the opposite side of the street, and it's usually a small group but a very noisy group. um, and so we've included in our weekly reminders to people, like, please don't engage. They're just here to get content for their right-wing social media channels, and you don't want to be that content. you know like,
yeah.
they're just
Mhm.
going to twist whatever well-meaning thing we try to say to them. So we do have some of those reminders. Then we introduce the guest speaker. Sometimes Jared is very good at preparing a story about, like he'll research news stories about immigrants who have been detained there and share someone's personal story. Um, and then the speaker comes to the microphone. And then we always close by asking people three things. And those three things are, um, do you, are you, are you here to support immigrants? Uh,
Mm,
do you believe in the US Constitution? And do you believe in nonviolence?
mm,
So we always remind people about, the principles of nonviolence. And we've heard actually from a lot of our attendees that they appreciate that they think that the way it's organized keeps people focused on those three things,
mhm.
you know. And we have also been very clear from the beginning that while there are many, many, many issues, many that we
Mm,
all feel passionately about. Um, what we're there for on Wednesdays is to focus on our immigrant neighbors, to focus
right.
on the people who are in that building or coming in and out of that building. And we always read the key amendments of the Constitution after the speaking portion.
Mhm,
Volunteers come up and read. We turn the speakers around to face the building and remind the people who work there of what they are violating every day.
mhm.
Um, and so that's always part of it. So we have worked really hard, and people have been, for the most part, pretty receptive to not bringing in other
Mm.
issues and causes to this particular
Yeah,
witness.
that's great. That's great. I love
Yeah.
hearing how it's so well organized and organized very closely towards the goal, right, that you're going
Hmm.
for there,
Hmm.
and keeping people on track with that. Which is another piece of, nonviolent practice, right? Is being very intentional about what your goals are and what you want to see happen and really driving towards those goals, even though there are plenty of other things that are worthy goals, but to focus on the one in order to eventually, hopefully, achieve something around that goal, right? So
Right.
it is
Right.
you are playing a long game, but playing a long game in a very intentional way, but also a way, also I imagine, there's not always the same group of people every week. And so having that consistency weekly allows new people to come in and understand what they're coming into, so, which is also really,
Yeah. Today we had a whole contingent of people who were there for the first time who came from Western Massachusetts.
wow.
And I was like, wow, you guys drove in from Western Mass. And the man
Hmm.
I was talking to was like, yeah, I've been wanting to get here. And
Hmm.
someone in their organization, like their community organizing group, had a connection to the Bearing Witness community and then was able to kind of get them plugged in. And they organized this whole carpool and came
Hmm.
out here. So it is really, and that's what inspires me is, to keep doing it, is that um, people are learning about it or joining it. And um, we all have to do the piece that we can do.
Right.
I think I went to the anti-racism training that PSNE hosted a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that Reverend Jermaine Ross Allam said was something about that we can't do everything, but
Right.
we all have to do the part that we can do.
Right. Right.
And that he said it much more eloquently than I did, but that was sort of one of my takeaways from that day.
Hmm.
Um, and it gets, yeah, we get tired, and everybody gets tired at certain points. Uh,
Sure.
so that's why doing these things in community um, really makes a difference as well. Not
Absolutely.
something that we do alone.
Yeah. Yeah. So this week, the pillar of nonviolence, number 5, is what's called avoiding internal violence of the spirit as well as external physical violence. So The second part is easy, right? Like I'm not somebody that engages in external physical violence. It's not how I show up. So it's easy for me not to engage in that because it's not something I'm drawn to. But that internal violence of the
Mm,
spirit is challenging for me sometimes, I have to say. I mean, I do get angry and sometimes have very judgy feelings towards others. And that internal barometer is such a challenge for me, that
yeah.
nonviolence of my own spirit, and especially around this set of issues, being married to an immigrant, I find it really hard because I feel the attack is like inside my house, uh,
Mm.
and towards my husband, especially. And so I'm curious how that shows up for you because, like me, you're a white woman who's in ministry, but married to someone from Latin America, and that's such a target right now. And so, how is that piece showing up for you these days?
Yeah. Actually, today, the speaker was one of my fellow co-organizers, Andrew Harris. He's the minister at the Burlington United Church of Christ.
Hmm.
And his remarks were directly about what you just raised, about how do we deal with those. He was speaking from himself for himself, of course, but like how do we deal with those feelings of
Hmm.
hate and rage and anger that bubble up from such this deep-seated place, and he
Yeah.
talked about how there is, righteous anger can be a
Mhm.
good thing, that we need that to motivate us, to take action about things that we see that are unjust and, um, not in keeping with what we know and believe God to be about in the world.
Yeah.
And he also, talked about, well, how do we deal with it when, that hate gets directed toward other people?
Hmm. Hmm.
Because he said something like, I hate these, I hate these policies, or I hate, um, we can hate things, but
Right.
he said, and I really struggle with not hating the people
Right.
themselves. And it's interesting because, as I shared, we have had this small group of pro-ICE, pro-Trump
Hmm.
supporters who show up on a regular basis. This one woman has a sign that says, Jesus is my savior, Trump is my president.
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't think that means what you think it means. like,
Yeah.
like I, I I really struggle with it. So one of the things that and she yells horrible, hateful things at us, calling us rapists, pedophiles, murderers, um, saying that we support letting uh, these vile criminals out there, and um, all kinds of just really hateful things about immigrants and then about us, as the people who are there, saying, no, actually, immigrants are human beings who have the right to be treated as human beings with dignity and all of these things. So, one of the things that I personally find to be very effective in countering my own anger towards her is we just have been singing. Like we
Yeah.
just sing. We just sing. I sang all like the whole time today through the megaphone. We were singing things like "We shall overcome" and "We shall not be moved" and "Freedom is coming." All these. This
Yeah.
little light of mine. That was what I was singing at the end of it. Was this little light of mine as people were walking back up toward the ice building. I forgot to say that after about an hour or so standing there, we line up on the side, one side of the sidewalk, and have a procession up to the the end of the District Ave, which is where the ice building is located. And
Mhm.
then we stand along Mall Road, which is a busier, more trafficked intersection, and we hold our signs and stuff. And so that was where I was singing this little
Yeah.
light of mine. Um, so singing for me has always been a refuge of sorts, and has always
Hmm.
um been something that I can go to when I just need to feel better about life,
Yeah.
life in general. But I find it to be a really effective counterbalance too.
Hmm.
Because, when she's screaming horrible things at us and we're just singing back
Yeah.
peaceful songs that focus on positive things,
Yeah.
it drowns her out, number one, which was my main motivation for encouraging others to sing. But it also gives us something positive to say.
Right.
You know, it's not like we're just screaming things back at her.
Hmm.
And so that's you know, one of the things that I think I mentioned before that we remind people don't engage. Like
Right.
just don't engage with that. But singing over it is not really engaging with her. It's just giving us something else to do. And yeah, but I still have those moments too where I really struggle with my own feelings of anger, of internal hatred toward people and groups that I think are just doing the most vile and deplorable things and how they're treating other people.
Yeah.
Um, and I, yeah, I don't know that I've really grappled with it until listening to Andrew's comments today and you raising this question. Thanks. Like, what do you do with that? What do you do with that?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think part of it is just knowing that it's ultimately not within my control.
Right. Yeah.
That there are some things that we have to give up and give over to God and just say, I can't carry this. I can't carry this anymore.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah.
not mine to carry.
Right.
So
Right. You all are not alone in that park every week, right? As where you're
yeah,
standing and that our faith says that we're never alone in those spaces. That God's spirit is with us. The larger communities we represent are alongside us. The supply
yeah.
of witnesses are with us, right? And so
Hmm.
um it's it also reminds me years and years ago, I bring this up all the time. I always tell people about this that years I heard Peter Gomes, who's passed away now, but
Mm,
who was the chaplain and pastor of the uh, congregation at Harvard, and said he tells this story about, just a pastoral story of being in ministry and a woman coming to see him one day, having just found out that she has this terminal cancer, and she's a young mom and
mm,
has a small child and is just so angry, right? Very angry at God, very angry about this reality in her life, and is saying to him, what do I do with my anger? Is sort of the
mm,
pastoral question she presents to him, and this anger that's coming out of this deep well of grief that I fear, which is really where I think a lot of my anger is these days, is really coming out of
yeah.
this grieving so much. And he said to her, he said, I always tell people to read the entirety of the book of Psalms because that has
Mm,
every human emotion is somewhere represented in that book, right? In the Psalms. And that, so what he was saying to her was, God has experienced all of these emotions before from God's people. You're not going to be the first one that's going to have a lot of things to say to God or that is mad or is angry. And
yeah.
so you can sort of rest assured that that's okay, right? And but it's that twin piece around this pillar of nonviolence, right? You're working on your own anger, and it's okay to be righteously angry because it's okay to be angry at things that are not acceptable and that are immoral or that are evil or that are harming people, or harming communities or harming creation, right? Like it's okay to be mad about
Mm,
those things.
hmm.
And dealing with the idea that, you don't devolve into physical acts of violence as a result of it, right? And so, but
And
also,
and it
figuring
also
out a way to work it out, with
you don't
others,
let it turn you inward
right?
and
Yeah,
and just withdraw from it.
Hmm.
and say, well, there's nothing I can do about that, you know? So I
Yeah.
think that's the other temptation um, that we have when the world feels overwhelming and the world feels like there's just too much going on, can
Hmm.
be to just say, okay, that's not, like I can't handle that,
Right.
and kind of pull back. So
Right. Yeah.
how do we
Avoiding.
still engage,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not let the anger uh or hate, not let the anger become this form of hatred that we
Hmm.
can't see the other people, we can't see the other side as humans,
Right. Right. We
because
can't
that's
turn
where,
away either. Yeah, we can't turn away. And that
yeah,
you're not there by yourself. I mean, I think of that couple, this as you started out the story of this vigil, this weekly vigil that was there
yeah,
on their own because of their deep-seated concerns. But then all of these other people started showing up, and it felt a little overwhelming, but it also, I'm sure, was helpful to have others carrying that with you, right?
yes.
Carrying that with you. And I
And
also,
it really bolsters you,
yeah,
gone
yeah,
from two people to we've had over 900 people at one of these
wow,
events. Today we
wow,
had about 500.
wow.
So the weekly attendance varies based on whatever's going on with the weather largely. Um, and we've had some other challenges, but it's usually a pretty good turnout. So,
Yeah. Well, and I also love that idea that you turn the speakers towards the ICE facility so that the
mm,
staff inside can hear as you read portions of the Constitution, because so often our anger is directed at people in these positions who are doing these things. And oftentimes, as we get to know them, we find out they are also victims and at some level,
yeah.
sometimes, and are struggling internally on their own. I remember being at a nonviolent action years ago, and I was, right face to face with a police officer, as we were, saying what we were saying. And it was a very both sort of tense moment and very physically close moment. And under their breath, I could hear some of the police officers saying the words with us so quietly.
Mm,
They agreed, but they were working. Yeah, it's like for whatever reason, they were stuck where they were stuck too. And that happens oftentimes, is that eventually there sometimes is a churning with those who are enacting these things and engaging in these things. And so
yeah.
it is uh, it is interesting, or whispering under their breath. I've heard from clergy that have been in Minneapolis who are also in these face-to-face, like almost nose to nose with police that you get into, and sometimes in these situations, and whispering under their breath, I agree.
Yeah.
I don't want to be here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pay my bills, something like that. And so there is a power in continuing to remind those people and care about them enough to say, was we're not going to vilify you, right? We're being
Hmm.
vilified from across the street, but we're not going to engage in vilification. But we are going to remind you of what the rules are here, right? We're going to
Yeah. And
remind
I mean, as
you of what
federal employees, these are the oaths that you've sworn to uphold, to defend the Constitution.
yeah,
And here's what the Constitution actually says. So,
right. And people going through the immigration process are going to take that oath, right?
yeah.
It's interesting because many of us who've grown up in the United States and were born here, um, if you haven't served in military service or in federal civil service, or potentially in state civil service, you've never actually taken that oath, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't think I've actually taken, like, read pieces of the Constitution as an oath that is prescribed to me by law or that is part of my
Hmm.
job, certainly. But we have oaths we take as clergy, these ordination vows, members of our churches. But those, uh, I certainly agree with the Constitution, right? I am a citizen of this country, and it is important to me. But yeah, when you work in those agencies, you're taking that as an oath as you work. So,
Well,
um,
and going through the naturalization process
yeah,
with
exactly. You take
with
it.
my spouse, I witnessed his naturalization
Yeah,
ceremony,
true. Yeah.
which was in 2016. It was
Hmm.
right around Independence Day. It was like early July, and it was in Faneuil Hall in Boston.
Wow.
So it was this historic building
Hmm.
named after a slaveholder.
Mm.
But it was really powerful to be in that space. So the family, family members are invited to come, but we had to sit in the gallery up above. And our daughter was only about, she must have been like, oh, she was little. Yeah, she was only like 5, I guess. Um, so she and I were up there in the gallery with like all these other family members, people from all over the world, and we're looking at, we're looking for our people down there, on the floor. Um, and that was a really powerful moment for me,
Hmm.
and then part of the naturalization ceremony is that people have to stand up and swear allegiance to the United States and the
Yeah.
Constitution.
Mhm.
Um, and I actually think it was probably more powerful for me than for Nelson,
I
because
agree. I think that's the way ours went too. Yeah.
he was already a little like, Ugh,
Yeah.
like I'm,
Yes.
I don't know, but he wanted, it was important for him to go through that because he wanted to be able to vote in that very powerful election, that
Yeah.
very momentous election we had in 2016. I still remember being so excited with him the day that, we went to vote together and everything, and
Mhm.
really thought things were going to turn out differently.
Yeah.
But um, so I do remember that ceremony very clearly. I found it to be a very powerful thing. And my mother is actually also a naturalized US citizen.
Wow.
So I went and witnessed her naturalization ceremony as well when I was either like an almost high school or an almost college graduate. I'm not sure
Mm.
exactly what year she did that, but it is a pretty
Yeah. It is amazing
thing
to
to
go to those
witness.
things. I've gone
Mhm.
to a few with some church members over the years and people, but my husband's was not as his was just in a courthouse in the federal building in Newark, New Jersey, and
Mhm.
we went in for that final appointment that morning, and I remember the immigration officer said when we were done with the final appointment and he was approved was, we have a swearing in this afternoon. You can go to that, or we have
Oh,
one in a few weeks if you want to wait and have family and friends come with you. Um, and he just said, let's do it today. Let's just do it. I want
you're
to
already there. Yeah.
be there. And I think, I know he didn't want to come back to the federal building ever again.
Sure. Yeah.
Because that building it's so hard to go to those appointments. I think people don't realize how hard it is to go in and out of those federal buildings all the time and go to
Right.
those appointments and the toll that it takes on those that are working through the immigration process. And I think he was definitely tired and at that point, and the building was traumatic to go into every time. He didn't want to come back to
Mhm.
the building. So
Mhm.
so we went and got a sandwich and hung out for an hour or two and came back at 2:30 and he was sworn in, but it was the same thing. It was,
Yeah.
they had us we were in a courtroom in the building and a federal courtroom and uh they had half of it cordoned off with a rope and so, all of us sat in the back and watched everybody in the front and it was the same thing. It was people from everywhere that were in there and
Mhm.
watching people from all over the world take that oath of citizenship was very powerful to watch.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it is it's a long process and it's a lot of work. And I think until you've walked it, it's hard to know what it's really like, and how much work it
Yeah.
really is, and how much people go through to do that. I think those of us that are born in the United States, um, we just have no idea until we're in the
Right.
middle of it. Because
Right. I
there's
mean,
no other way for you to see it otherwise.
when people say, "Oh, just do it the right way, just come in the right way." Well, a lot of people come in the right way, and even that takes them years. I mean, Nelson
Oh,
was here. He came in 1999. He became a citizen in 2016.
hmm.
And
Exactly.
that was, we'd already been married for 10 years by that point. My mom came as um, a teenager with her family, immigrated from Scotland, and she lived in the US for I don't know, probably over 30 years as a, permanent resident green card holder
Right,
until she decided to become a citizen. So,
right, right. Yeah,
um,
it is a
that's a
long
long time.
process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we have a neighbor who just became a citizen this fall and was going to stay as a permanent green card holder, kind of like what your mom did for so long. But then with things changing so quickly, realized that was no longer safe. And so
Hmm.
um, had a very quick swearing in, but did it and uh, really was so concerned for her safety that
Hmm.
and that's not that's also sad to hear, right? That we have such a situation going on at this point that people are so afraid. It's that trying to find any kind of protection. And again, my neighbor's been here for the United States for many, many years. She's a labor and delivery nurse. She's it's good friends of ours down the street. So it's an interesting moment that we're in and a very scary and troubling moment for our ministry.
Yeah.
So as we close out, just two questions, Trina. First is a quick, easy one. If people want to come join you all, tell us like what time and where, and if they want to get more info, how to find out.
Great. So it's Bearing Witness at ICE. We have a website, bearingwitnessne.org.
Mhm.
We should verify that.
That's okay. We'll
Um,
put it up on the in the show notes. I'll verify it. Right.
and we do also have a Facebook group that you can find if you search for Bearing Witness at ICE. We meet every Wednesday from 11 to 1 at 1000 District Avenue in Burlington, Massachusetts. And there are guidance about where to park and um, how to get there on the website.
Great. Great.
Hmm.
Well, I asked the same closing question for all these podcasts. So, there's a podcast I listen to that at the end asks their guests this question of what makes you optimistic and what outrages you, right? And so a good way of phrasing that as Presbyterians is like, where do you still see total depravity? And where do you see the Holy Spirit? Where's the challenge? Where's the hope?
Yeah, that's a deep question. Um, I mean, there are plenty of the total depravity and outrage things every day. The most recent um, outrage that related to ICE I've been that I've read about is a Haitian man who was in detention and who died as the result of having an abscessed tooth.
Hmm.
He did not get medical treatment. What medical treatment was not provided to him in the manner and expediency with which it should have been. And
Hmm.
he died as a result of a tooth infection, which should never happen,
Right.
you know? Um, and, other cases of people being
Mm.
abandoned, released from detention and abandoned,
Yes.
and who have also died
Hmm.
because of that.
Yeah,
So
abandoned by cold
I,
and yes,
yeah, the man in Buffalo and a woman in Pittsburgh
yes,
recently.
yes.
So I think that seeing how people are being treated
Hmm.
with such a lack of humanity, and that stems from the rhetoric that we're hearing from the president on down that
Hmm.
are dehumanizing people
Hmm.
and that are normalizing, you know, treating others this way. So that's where my outrage is directed now. How do we stem that? How do we combat that and um, be the voice that articulates what what I believe God and Jesus are about and came to teach all of us that you know it's really pretty simple. you know it's really not that hard. Well, it is that hard, but it's a
Right.
simple message to love your neighbor as yourself and to do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with your God. I think those are the two texts that are the cornerstone for me, like make up the cornerstone of my faith, um, and that I hope to be a witness of
Hmm.
in the world. Yeah.
Thanks, Trina. Thank you. You give me a lot of optimism. I'm grateful for you, for your ministry, for your witness. And I hope that for those who are listening, to imagine ways that they can also show up in their local community. We will link any of the things that we talked about today, the website, the information about how to show up if you'd like to in Burlington, and other resources will be in the podcast notes for this session. So thank you, Trina, for your witness.
Yeah.
Thank you for your ministry. And
Thank
thanks for
you.
being part of this little mini series on nonviolence for Lent.
If
And
anybody from PSNE is coming up, let me know.
we
Email
will.
me,
Yeah,
call
we need to
me.
get over there.
Yeah,
Um, and we're just glad to chat with our friends over in Boston Presbytery, of course, and the sort of emerging shared ministry among our two presbyteries. So that's always a good thing to be about as well. So
that's
thanks so
good.
much, Trina, for being part of
Yeah.
connecting our conversations.
Thanks for hosting.